Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the TDLC online event, QII Principle in Action, Learning from Fukuoka and Toyama. My name is Shin Tanabe, a Knowledge Management Analyst at World Bank Tokyo Development Learning Center. Before we begin this event, I would like to make a few housekeeping announcements. First of all, if you have any questions for speakers, please type your message into the stage chat box. We will collect questions and share them with our event moderators. Secondly, if you like to see PowerPoint presentation full screen, please enlarge the screen by clicking the box-like icon on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. As this is a bilingual event, let me explain in Japanese as well. 本日は TDLC イベント、質の高いインフラ投資 QII の適用と実践、福岡市と富山市の取り組みにご参加いただきましてありがとうございます。私は東京開発ラーニングセンターの田辺慎と申します。本日は日本語の同時通訳を行っております。日本語をお聞きされる方はお手数ではございますが、イベントサイトに掲載しております QR コードをスマートフォン、ないしはパソコンで読み込んでいただき、ログインページ記載されておりますトークン、TDLC QII 2021を入力くださいますようお願いいたします。使用方法の詳細につきましても、イベントサイトでご案内しております。また、発表内容に関する質問等につきましては、チャットにて受けたまわります。ステージという、書かれたチャットスペースがございますので、そちらで日本語ないしは英語で、質問内容をですね、ご記入ください。パソコンをお使いの方は、向かって右側に、ございます。また、プレゼンテーション資料が見えにくいと感じられる場合は、スクリーンのですね、右下にカーソルを移動していただきますと、四角いアイコンが出てまいります。それをクリックいただくことで、画面を大きくすることができます。Now, I would like to invite our two moderators for this event, Ms. Fatouma Ibrahima, Practice Manager of the PPP Group for the World Bank Infrastructure, Finance, PPPs, and Guarantees Department, and Maitreyi Das, Practice Manager of the Global Unit for the Urban Disaster Risk Management, Resilience, and Land Global Practice. I will first invite Fatouma to the stage. Fatouma, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shin. Good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen in Asia and in the US. My name is Fatouma Toure Ibrahima. On behalf of the Quality Infrastructure Investment Partnership and on behalf of the World Bank Tokyo Development Learning Center, I'm really pleased to co-chair this event with my colleague, Maitreyi Das, and welcome you to this QII webinar on lessons learned from Japanese cities. The issues suggested for discussion today can only fully be addressed if we leverage our partnerships. And today I would like to mention the importance of our partnership at the World Bank Group with the government of Japan. Maitreyi, over to you. Maitreyi Das is the practice manager at the Urban Global Practice, covering social, urban, and rural resilience. Over to you, Maitreyi. I think my colleague Maitreyi is having some technical issues. I think I can maybe continue. I will give my opening remarks and then ask Maitreyi to come in at a later stage. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to highlight the importance of partnership, and the World Bank and the government of Japan have had long-standing collaboration, not only around the issues of infrastructure, but also on the issue of resilience. So we would like to extend our gratitude to the Ministry of Finance and mention that the World Bank and the government of Japan have established the QII partnership with the objective of raising awareness and scaling up attention to the quality dimensions of infrastructure in developing countries. This is a very important agenda and the QII principle align very well with our priorities within the World Bank as they relate to maximizing the positive impact of economic infrastructure, raising economic efficiency in view of life cycle cost, integrating environmental considerations, building resilience against natural disaster, and integrating social consideration, as well as strengthening infrastructure governance around our operational principles. So QII has supported about 70 activities which are associated with a large portfolio of lending operation within the bank, standing for about 18 billion in infrastructure and sustainable development. So strengthening economic efficiency in view of life cycle costs and infrastructure governance are key priorities for us, especially today, given the importance of managing risks and establishing clear priorities in the current context. So as we try to recover from the pandemic, these factors of efficiency and resilience are really important. So the World Bank considers investments in infrastructure development in developing countries are indispensable for achieving our twin goals. And I would like to really mention the importance of the G20's view that infrastructure investment that incorporate the elements of QII principles are key going forward. Now, the discussion for today is also very critical because it leverages Japan's experience, and the case studies that we are going to discuss today are really key. QII plays a very important role in supporting a sustainable recovery from the COVID crisis. So in this context, TDLC and QII have published 2 case studies that showcase how QII has been operationalized in select urban infrastructure. Specifically, the World Bank research team has documented Fukuoka City's efficient water management and Toyama City's compact city development initiative through the lens of economic efficiency and infrastructure governance. So I'm really pleased to open this session and the conversations on these 2 case studies. I'm not sure whether my co-chair, Maitreyi, has been able to connect, but without further ado, I would like to invite our 2 presenters to come in if they are ready. Over to you. Haruka Miki Imoto, Operations Officer at the World Bank, TDLC, and Hiroshi Nishimaki, Consultant at the World Bank, will be our 2 presenters, because this is really at the core of our conversation today. I would not want to delay the presentation. I would like to invite them to come in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatouma, for this nice introduction. Hiroshi, the co-author of the QII case studies, and I are very delighted to spend the next 25 minutes introducing Japan's journey on shaping 6 principles of quality infrastructure over the decades. We are very honored to present these lessons, which Fatouma just briefly explained. Dear participants, this is just a friendly reminder that in case you want to see the slide in full mode, please click on the screen and expand on full view. So as Fatouma has explained, infrastructure is a critical basis of a country and a city to thrive and make a sustainable, competitive, and livable environment. Many of us will be fully convinced and wish to join to apply the principles in their own country and city infrastructure. How Japan has started applying these different principles indicated in the slide still stays a mystery to some of the practitioners. Taking this opportunity with Hiroshi, can you walk us through how Japan has started operationalizing some aspect of QII principles, starting with the rapid after post-war reconstruction period and during the population boom, which is basically between the late 1940s to early 1990s. So Hiroshi, I will let you maybe speak, and then you have a few minutes for this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Haruka. Can you hear me? Okay. These 6 QII principles adopted in Osaka reflect international norms such as sustainability, efficiency, environment, and social consideration and governance, this is applicable in any country. At the same time, what we have attempted to accomplish in the evolution of QII principle was to narrate the origin of QII principles in Japanese context, especially through the post-war infrastructure development. We basically had 3 stages, as Haruka mentioned. The first stage was very vigorous economic development and urbanization. And the underneath of this economic growth of the first stage was a very dynamic social migration from rural to urban areas. From 1950 to 1980, urban population in Japan increased from nearly 30% to 60%. And in the case of Tokyo metropolitan area, it has grown from mere 10 million to 30 million in population. And this meant that Japan had to build infrastructure very quickly to accommodate the huge influx of populations while maintaining the efficiency in operation and circulation of the cities. So one of the social innovations we had in this period, which was not seen in other countries, was development of urban railways as backbones for commuting transport. So-called Japanese TOD was principally done during this period to accommodate the urbanization. But surprisingly, principally this was done in the large cities by private sector before PPP became a fashion. On the public side, the government established many specialized agencies for infrastructure development, including housing, new town development, sanitation, highways, and other roads and railways, to incorporate the cutting-edge technologies in infrastructure planning and the construction methods, supported with many legal frameworks to promote infrastructure development every sectors. And in other words, Japan developed a very highly sophisticated institutional structure for effective and efficient governance implementing during this period. Okay, back to you, Haruka.
Thank you so much, Hiroshi. This period, the 2 phases you just discussed or explained, is very critical because it's very applicable to many of our client countries for the World Bank, finance project. It is very interesting to hear how the QII principle, such as 1, on infrastructure-led growth and sustainable development, and 2, on economic efficiency, focusing on life cycle cost, have operationalized during this period, right? Perhaps I can ask you the next question, Hiroshi. So to fast forward the decades, can you perhaps summarize what was the evolution after the 1990s up to today? I know some other principles have also deepened during this period, although each principle probably had its nascent prior to that phase. So thank you. Over to you, Hiroshi.
Okay, so after the passing of the economic booms in 1980s, Japan had to struggle through a much slower pace of economic development at this stage, starting in 1990s. The undercurrent of this change was a demographic shift in Japan. Many of you know that the population of Japan started to decline in 2008, actually. But if you look at more closely, the demographics, the working age group population between age 15 and 65 started to decline as early as 1995. So economic stagnation was more of a demographic origin. And the stagnation meant also a physical limitation for public works. So we recognized there was less working population to take care of maintenance and rehabilitation of the past infrastructure assets in the future to come. Yes. And the solution was to have a longer lasting infrastructure with higher quality that is efficiency in terms of life cycle cost. And with the physical difficulties, there was a growing public outcries for transparency and accountability in public expenditure for public works. So another dimension we needed to governance was transparency and accountability, in addition to efficiency and the effectiveness in the first stage and second stage. So it was also the case, the things come in waves. In addition to these social challenges, there were a series of natural and human disasters after the turn of the century. The first great Hanshin earthquake hit 1995, when we saw a huge section of our highway toppled, and then we had 2011, the Great East earthquake. We had to face a huge task of rebuilding infrastructure, and in a lesser time, in a smaller incident, but in 2012, we had this Sago Tunnel incident, in which over 180-meter span of the ceiling structure had collapsed, causing 9 people to be killed, casualties, due to wears and tears of the simple anchor bolts that held the ceiling structures. So we had to come to realize that infrastructure too will age and become more vulnerable against especially disasters. So, since the majority of the infrastructure was built before 1980 in Japan, by 2030, the majority of infrastructure in roads, bridges, river, dikes, everything will be over 50 years old in Japan, which considered to be like the end of the life cycle for the concrete structures. So the life cycle cost became a very, very matter of importance. And the aging will increase the vulnerability against disaster. So without quality, its maintenance and rehabilitation costs will escalate. So government responded, aiming at enhancing infrastructure against more disaster resilience and overcoming the life cycle cost. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Haruka.
Thank you, Grace. So this was very comprehensive. Nevertheless, in such a short time, do you want to talk briefly about this comprehensive evaluation which Japan is applying, or should we dive into the 2 cases?
Okay, well, I think we still have time, and I will go briefly. This comprehensive evaluation is basically a 2-envelope price plus technical proposal bidding system for construction work. And it was first incorporated in 1998, but it actually went into effect 2005 by the passing the law to promote quality assurance in public works. And this improved the life cycle cost efficiency, social, environmental, and consideration, disaster resilience, while keeping the enhanced accountability and transparency in selecting the contractors. And this is actually the norm now in Japan for major works. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Hiroshi. So I understand this comprehensive evaluation system is pretty common nowadays in Japan when it comes to public investment procurement, right? Yeah. I know that the MDB, such as the World Bank, also has similar schemes. So we might be able to hear a little bit about this in the next session. Let's move on to the 2 cases, because I think those are the ones that would probably interest a lot of audience, right? So maybe before I ask you a question, Hiroshi, let me just briefly summarize why Fukuoka, what the city is all about. So the first case study we decided to do, as Fatouma nicely introduced, it's on efficient water management in Fukuoka. Fukuoka City is one of the most prominent cities in Japan today. Why? Historically, it's being the gateway connecting Japan and nearby Asian cities located in Kyushu Island. The city has quickly shifted from post-war growth model led by heavy industries to a modern growth model led by the service sector. Very much as this rapid, kind of the industrial transformation happening in the city. Why? well, the city's livability standards and competitiveness are attracting people and businesses. The city's population is growing at 1% per year, which is really rivaled only by a few other major cities. And we are talking about aging population, declining population nationally. The city attracts about 50 companies and 2,000 jobs per year in growing industries. Today, citizens enjoy a modern lifestyle with highly livable environments near their workplace. So it sounds like a very ideal place, right, to live. But I know that I'm hoping to reverse out our clock a little bit and see how the city has consolidated its basic urban infrastructure back in 1970s up to today. The reason why is that we know that Fukuoka is now known as a rising hub for cutting-edge industries, including startups. But we also know that the city overcame some challenge which our client country cities may be familiar, such as series of water scarcity problem. So using next 6 minutes or so, Hiroshi, I was hoping if you can highlight how the city faced this urban challenge by implementing the QII principles, including that for the life cycle cost, and perhaps some of the aspect of infrastructure governance. So over to you, Hiroshi.
Okay. Our story in Fukuoka starts in 1978 when a severe drought hit the city. And the city was forced to ration water supply nearly a year. And under the rapid urbanization and economic development, the cutting the basics line, human needs line, it was very, very negative. So at the same time, the city had a very small water catchment area. So there was a limit to water supply origin. And the logical solution for the city was to save every drop of water, and 5-decade-long commitment to the water scarcity solution brought the sort of the national model for life cycle cost optimization. If you look at the summary here, in the investment phase, Fukuoka adopted ductile pipe, which is considered to be most durable material. In addition, they adopted this pipe installation standards to require polyethylene sleeves. In the operation phase, Fukuoka established Central Command Center for Water Distribution Network as early as 1981. And at the same time, they pursued the comprehensive leakage reduction program. And Fukuoka has achieved reduced the water leakage rate from 40% to 2% now. After all, we undertook the financial evaluation of the overall leakage reduction programs of these combined. When we spoke to the city official, they believed that the measure was more of environmental or political and not really economical. But we've discovered that financial return on the investments came out to be at least 15%. It's not economic. It's a saving of the water amounted to 15% on investment return. And also, the city introduced a wastewater recycling system. But now let us look at more closely. In 1979, Fukuoka City revised their procurement policy to require polyethylene sleeves for new installed pipes, in addition to ductile pipes. These polyethylene sleeves add only 1 to 2% to the initial investment cost. And the technology was not something glamorous. So other cities kind of hesitated to introduce because it was very cumbersome. But as you see in this picture, the difference in the post-examinations even obvious visually. Sleeves proved to extend the pipe lifespan by 40 years. And today, 70% of the entire pipes of 3,000 kilometers of cities have polyethylene sleeves protection. This never done. And the impact is very large because the life cycle of the pipe network of the city is not 50 years. It might be 100 years. It doubled. So the replacement cycle is very, very extended, which is not very easy to replicate if you don't commit to the one standard for such a long time. And in 1981, this is the distribution center. This basically controls the water pressure, and the water pressure actually surges during the nighttime when people don't use it. And this damages the pipe network. And they introduced to control the pressures during the nighttime to minimize the damage. This helped a lot, and also helped the water sort of allocation as well. Okay, and these are the leakage reduction programs. They have standard detection surveys and repair programs, which is done in many cities now in the world, but they have also put cathodic protection and service pipe replacement, lead service pipe replacement. These three programs are more preventive measures for leakages. Instead of doing afterwards, they want to prevent leakages as much as they can. So these also contribute a lot, although they have to do continuous work, which is very, very laborsome. And then again, water recycling also was introduced, was one of the first projects in Japan in 1979. And in terms of the volume, it is not substantial, but it raised the awareness of the citizen to such a level that the city is so committed and the citizens have to save. And in 1995, there was another drought. So the city decided to expand the area by another 900 hectares. In 2003, city passed the ordinance to promotion of water saving, requiring large buildings to install 2 pipe systems in the building to use the recycled water. I think this created a huge awareness of the water scarcity in the city of Fukuoka. Okay, thank you, Haruka.
Thank you, Hiroshi. So some of the takeaway from this Fukuoka City case is that the city can do some of the things such as identify bottlenecks for growth and clear them through early consolidation of basic infrastructure. The approach is particularly important for cities that are about to have or just enter the rapid growth period, because it allows them to minimize future adverse effects of rapid urbanization. Maybe I can skip some of the takeaway from technical point and now move to the Toyama case. So let's move to the second case, and then we can wrap up. So Toyama, we have done 2 case studies for the QII case studies. Toyama is known as one of the most global role models for compact city development. Becoming a role model was not that easy journey. The city was a typical Japanese city with urban sprawl and demographic challenges. Its population density was one of the lowest among prefectural capitals. And then it also has this deterioration of public transport services. In response to these challenges, Toyama City took a more integrated approach to urban and transport planning. So Hiroshi, I'm trying to time manage. We have about 5 minutes. So if you can briefly walk us through your finding from the case study, how the Toyama City has compact city planning can be a good example for our client countries and cities. What are the lessons, especially for our client countries? You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Toyama case starts like in 2003 when most of the rural cities in Japan started to grapple with this declining population and aging city society problems, as we discussed. And also they were the pioneers in the LRT development. And And now the case is like this. In the right-hand side map, the green line represents the newly planned high-speed railway Shinkansen line. And the first LRT line was this blue line, so-called port line. And this was good news because the Japanese parliament decided to extend the Shinkansen to Toyama, but came with a big surprise because the Japan Railway and Toyama Prefecture asked Toyama City to assume the management of the responsibility of the existing port lines, this blue line. And many of the local lines at the time sometimes were decided to be closed because there was no financial operation benefit. And Toyama so had to face whether close the line or continue by assuming the line. And the challenge was that the construction of the Shinkansen line, the station work was due to start in 2006. So they had a 3 years opening window to continue the non-stop operation. And they had a choice of closing it and resorting to the bus transit. But at the same time, as you know, this compact city thing is that the Toyama decided to have LRT as a backbone because the aged population, aged people, would not be able to freely drive. And the public transit was the core to keep the mobility for the aged citizens. So keeping the port line was inevitable, but they had this 3-year opening. Now, and so this decided to use these 7.6 kilometer track as it is and put the LRT on top of it, and they closed the station and put the new station close to the station. And they had this 3 years. And again, we took the liberty of doing the economic analysis, and the reuse of the existing track saved the capex by almost 70%. And forced to have 3-year construction period also improved the economic return on investment. And in our calculation, it doubled the net present value by twice, 100%. Okay. Of course, this new LRT had upgraded service, very stylish design, very appealing, and very low floor. Even the baby cart or the wheel cart can move in without interruption. So that there was great appeal. Anyway, but at the same time, in terms of governance, they didn't forego the accountability, public involvement, or stakeholder support, because the management, especially mayors, engaged in extensive public hearings, and they had this economic evaluation committee and having approved by city council. So they have met all the accountability requirement in a very, very short period of time by using the best resources available and having a very, very slim organization. The story is very extensive, but in the short term, they have done efficiency and the governance at the same time. And as the end, we saw that the return of people in the city central areas and also the rise in the land values, famous land value capture was achieved because of this meeting the big challenge. Okay, I think it's about time. Back to you, Haruka.
Thank you so much, Hiroshi. I have quite a few questions. I know our time to have a further discussions is very limited. So I would like to wrap up with the following takeaway from this Toyama case. The first is effective governance can really be a powerful driver for transformation. That was the case for Toyama City. And also an integrated approach of urban and transport, which we often define as transit-oriented development, is key to tackle urban challenges. And with this, I would like to actually say thank you to Hiroshi for your presentation and pass back the microphone back to Fatouma. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Haruka and Hiroshi, for an excellent presentation. Thank you for the insightful elements, not only on the evolution of QII principles in Japan, but the implications for developing country and the life cycle optimization. So documenting these examples are really important for our client country who often miss the roadmap needed from the vision to implementation. So I would like to really build on this very informative presentation and welcome Mr. Masashi Tanabe. Mr. Masashi Tanabe is the Director of Multilateral Development Banks Division at the International Department of the Ministry of Finance of Japan. And I would like to invite Mr. Tanabe to deliver his remarks before we move to the second segment of today's webinar. So over to you, Mr. Tanabe-san. And the blue button is on the upper side, left, or rather right on the screen.
Okay. Thank you, Fatouma. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, thank you, Fatouma, for giving me the floor. And I'm terribly sorry for the technical trouble we had. Distinguished guests and speakers, all the participants and World Bank staff, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. On behalf of the government of Japan, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the World Bank for organizing this important event. I'm glad to see many people, including policymakers, implementing agencies, and international partners are participating in this seminar. Infrastructure is a driver of economic growth and prosperity. The quality of infrastructure is essential to ensure a solid basis for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development. With this belief, Japan has emphasized the importance of quality infrastructure investment, or QII. In 2019, under Japanese presidency, G20 member countries endorsed G20 principles for quality infrastructure investments as a common strategic direction and high aspiration. The QII principles underscore the importance of raising economic efficiency in view of life cycle costs, building resilience against natural disasters and other risks, and strengthening infrastructure governance, among others. These QII principles cannot be built in a day, but have been and will continue to be developed on our experiences and practices. I believe that today's presentation delivered by World Bank Group, Hiroshi, has well summarized the evolution of QII principles in Japan by describing how Japan has addressed and overcome its social and economic challenges in each phase of development. The next step is to put the principle into practice in developing countries by reflecting them in the design and implementation of projects in the field. In this regard, Japan has been collaborating with the World Bank Group to promote the QII agenda actively. In particular, in the recovery phase from the COVID-19 impact, investment in quality infrastructure will play a key role to achieve building back better for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable growth. In this regard, World Bank's Tokyo Development Learning Center, TDLC, has a pivotal role to share the practices of QII principles with developing countries. As one of the activities of the TDLC, it has conducted some case studies to share Japan's experience and knowledge on QII. Today, TDLC has introduced some case studies of Fukuoka City and Toyama City as Japan's best practices. I believe the case of Fukuoka City is an informative example of optimizing the life cycle costs of the water sector, and the case of Toyama City is a successful case of economic efficiency achieved by compact city development. Japan has a strong commitment to promoting QII with the World Bank Group and other development partners. In this regard, this seminar is an excellent opportunity for exchanging knowledge and experiences of QII. I hope this seminar will contribute to further dissemination and implementation of G20 QII principles to help developing countries to achieve building back better from the COVID-19 impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tanabe, and thank you for reminding us of the importance of the quality infrastructure principles, not only the context of COVID-19, but to build back better. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for highlighting the great collaboration between the World Bank Group and the government of Japan. So on that, I'm really pleased to open the second part of this webinar and introduce my colleague Maitreyi, who will take over the chairmanship. Thank you very much, Mr. Tanabe. Over to you, Maitreyi.
Thank you very much, Fatouma. And if I can just hear from you whether people are hearing me in the chat box, it would be great. Thank you again, and my apologies in the past for the technical glitches that I've had in the course of the first session. I want to start by thanking Tanabe-san for coming and gracing the occasion and for giving us his words of wisdom as far as QII is concerned, but also in terms of the incredible collaboration that the World Bank has had with Japan in general, but particularly in the context of QII and TDLC. So we are very grateful for that collaboration. And these case studies have actually emerged almost as a product of that collaboration, because, as you know, we have special relationships with both Toyama and Fukuoka cities through TDLC. So without further ado, I want to move to the next session. We heard two wonderful cases being presented in the previous session. And in this upcoming session, we will hear a commentary on those sessions. And I would like to introduce first my colleague, Clive Harris, who is lead infrastructure specialist at the World Bank. And let me ask Clive, what are your reflections, Clive, as you heard the two cases on QII from Japan?
Thank you, Maitreyi. I hope everybody can hear me. And good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone. It was a real pleasure to hear those case studies. I think they were both very instructive in terms of giving us an idea of what it takes to operationalize those principles. And Maitreyi, what I wanted to do was share 3 points reflecting on the case studies, but also really focusing on what we need to do to be able to operationalize these fully within World Bank projects. So the first of these is that, and it's perhaps the most obvious point, but when we do finance investment projects, we have to make sure that we take steps to incorporate the principles that are applicable into these projects. Of course, the bank has long had a focus on economic returns, which is reflected in part of the principles, and resilience has become a very important feature of our projects recently. But there are other areas where we've recently made some strides, and I just wanted to mention those. A couple of examples perhaps to highlight are how we've been incorporating life cycle costs in procurement as an explicit way of trying to make sure that when our clients procure using World Bank loans, that they get something that reflects the lifetime cost of the asset. And we heard from the first case study how important that was. So, for example, Turkey's national gas company was aiming to expand underground gas storage. And with World Bank support, we optimized their procurement approach to achieve economic efficiency and value for money, basically by having bid criteria that assessed the plant's life cycle cost, including operations and maintenance. And so that was an important way of trying to make sure we had this lifetime value for money. And we made sure that forward, this was something that had been factored into the decisions that the government was taking. We've got several other examples of that. So, for example, in Paraguay, a similar case at trying to incorporate life cycle costing into procurement, which looked at the expansion of the 500 kV transmission lines and network and associated substations. And so there, what we did was working with the National Electricity Administration, ANDE, we made sure that the cost of energy loss was used as a criteria to evaluate these bids. Now, there's lots of technical detail there, and we actually have some case studies we're bringing out. But I think the main point there is we know that for most infrastructure investments, the recurrent costs are often very high, often over the lifetime of the asset equal to the upfront investment cost. So we have to make sure that that's reflected. And so that's perhaps some of the new areas we're building it into our investment projects. The second point I'd like to make is that what I mentioned before about making sure this is all done at the project level, that's necessary, but actually I don't think it's going to be sufficient to fully operationalize the QII principles. As we've heard from both in the case studies and Director Tanabe mentioned how the time period which is needed to fully operationalize and institutionalize QII. And typical bank projects are only for 5 years. And the institutional changes, the capacity building and the reforms that are needed to develop and maintain a focus on the QII principles are medium-term changes, long-term changes in some case, and they will go beyond 5 years. So as well as making sure this is done in particular projects that we're supporting, we need to look at other ways in which we can do that and work with our clients and our partners such as JICA. This could include making sure that technical assistance and capacity building is in place. It could also include making sure that when we're working to strengthen policy frameworks and institutions, which are often done through policy lending that the bank does, budgetary support that is, that those reflect the QII principles and that important changes are made there. And actually in this regard, I did want to mention that for a set of IDA countries as part of an IDA 19 policy assessment, we're doing policy assessments to look at the gaps that are needed. And this will be multidisciplinary, as many things are, working with government colleagues and our colleagues working on procurement. The final point I'll very quickly make is that we need a lot more of what we're doing right now. We need a lot more knowledge and dissemination efforts. We're very much committed to that as an activity under the QII Partnership. But we need to build up the library of case studies on QII principles and their operationalization. In particular, we need to make sure that the benefits of these, in terms of better service delivery, better quality of infrastructure assets, and ultimately lower lifetime costs are very clearly articulated so everyone understands the benefit. And we need to make sure that staff and our clients know how to do this and have the knowledge and capabilities. Let me stop there, Maitreyi. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Clive. That was what that brought to us was how do we take these principles, how do we take the learnings from Japan and apply them as we design projects for the World Bank and give advice to our client countries. And thank you for bringing that global and more general perspective to bear on this discussion. Kiyoshi, Amada-san, thank you very much for joining us. And it is my great pleasure to introduce you as the Director General for Infrastructure Management Department in JICA. Again, the collaboration with JICA for us is extremely important. So it's a great pleasure for us to have you here. In terms of, you heard what Clive said, and you heard the two presentations that went before that. What I'd like to hear from you is a bit of the perspective from JICA and how, as you provide advice to the countries that you work in, how do you take these principles and carry them forward in terms of applicability to different contexts? Over to you, Amada-san.
Thank you very much, Maitreyi. I'm Kiyoshi Amada from JICA, a Japanese governmental organization to provide finance for infrastructure as well as technical cooperation. So next slide, please. First of all, I would like to appreciate World Bank Tokyo Distance Learning Center's effort of these two papers as a good case study of quality infrastructure. So having learned from the presentation and the discussion so far, I have nothing to add on those two issues, Principle 2 and Principle 6. So let me raise two other issues in relation with quality infrastructure investment One is capacity development, the other is sustainable development goals. As Clive has already mentioned, building institutional capacities and individual capacity is the key to realize quality infrastructure. Last November, I had a chance to discuss about the compendium of quality infrastructure investment at OECD seminar, which was prepared by OECD. So, of course, nobody had an objection on importance of 6 principles of QII, but all of discussants agreed that institutional and individual capacities make it possible. So from that viewpoint, although it is easy to understand that the case studies that both Fukuoka and Toyama City have such capacities and good human resources, but still we might expect that the case studies could enhance their value furthermore by deepening analysis on how these capacities were built. So next, this slide is okay. So the first photo shows Fukuoka City contributed to water engineers in Fiji and the JICA Technical Cooperation Project. So for the water sector, we have a good case of capacity development of Cambodia's Phnom Penh Water Supply Authority together with Kita-Kyushu City located next to Fukuoka City. That is a very good example how our capacity was developed. So next slide, please. As for the public transport and the city management, we work together with the Philippine government to develop their metro operators capacity. And also the process of preparing a master plan of urban development contribute to capacity building of city planners. Next, please. Together with the international society, Japanese government also committed in sustainable development goals, such as QII Principle 1, actually. From the viewpoint of SDGs, Fukuoka is the case of Goal 6, water, and Toyama, Goal 11, sustainable cities. We also recognize that they help achieving other goals, 9, 8, 13, and others. And also, as I touched upon, Fukuoka City works in partnership with Fiji. Finally, we are looking forward to seeing the super outcome, poverty alleviation. Last slide, please. So, under good partnership, we're ready to work together with World Bank, TDLC, and all other stakeholders by utilizing Japanese experience and resources for quality infrastructure and sustainable development. I hope that TDLC will continue to enhance its analysis on quality infrastructure. So I really want to cooperate with World Bank and the TDLC furthermore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amada-san. And let me make an announcement to our participants. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. But since as yet we do not have any comments or questions, I want to take the opportunity to ask first Clive and then Amada-san that, you know, we have the countries that we work with run the entire gamut from OECD type countries to fairly low income countries. And the pressures of the, you know, the regulatory, the enabling environment, the all kinds of, you know, financial and non-financial institutional issues are so important. What advice would you give our countries that don't look like OECD countries, that are countries, say, that have low income and likely fragile countries? Clive.
Sure, thank you, Maitreyi. So I think there's two things which are important for them to consider. So the first is that the infrastructure needs are going to be much bigger in those countries. Potentially, spending is going to be much larger as a percentage of GDP. That's probably what you'd want to see. And so all the things we're talking about are actually probably even more critical. What is the recurrent cost going to be? Are they getting the investment decisions correct? And I think it's one thing that we're doing, I very briefly mentioned it, is we are doing under IDA 19 a set of assessments of infrastructure governance. And this is actually being supported by the partnership. But what we're doing there is trying to look at the weak spots to say, okay, here are the areas which most need strengthening. And the idea is that these then lead to policy changes. So I think this type of thing, which directly connects some of the weaknesses in capacity to project outcomes through this type of assessment, can help both individual projects and help overall. So I think those are some important things to bear in mind.
Thank you, Clive. And you make a very important point about the ex-ante diagnostics and having a strong sort of a feasibility, if you will, study in place to be able to give the countries enough of data and ability to make informed decisions. So, Amada-san, turning to you from the experience of JICA, when you advise countries, and if you can give a couple of examples of some countries that you may have advised, where it's very difficult for them to take an example from an advanced city like Fukuoka or an advanced city like Toyama, and to be able to apply it to them, to their own context. How do you go about bridging this gap between the ideal and their reality?
Okay, thank you, Maitreyi. So, as from our experiences, I think it is pretty much important for the practitioner. The politician needs to authorize the practitioner to understand the issue and to develop their way to solve the problem or solve the issues. So the practitioner can understand the issue and develop their idea, then to propose their idea or the answer of the solution to be authorized by the government, higher authorities. So a kind of the trust would be necessary among the people, or among the stakeholders, including the development partners like us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Haruka, let me turn to you as someone who has led the production of these two case studies. When you spoke to stakeholders, government officials, private sector in the cities of Fukuoka and Toyama, both these cities, and the pictures that Amada-san showed are testimony to that fact. These two cities provide a lot of capacity building and advice themselves directly and through agencies like JICA to other countries. Did you have a conversation about them as to the challenges that they have faced and how they have managed to overcome some of them? Or what they put in place? Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, as Amada-san nicely explained, as Maitreyi also introduced, the two cities, actually it's not only the two cities, TDLC works extensively with different cities through our city partnership program. So two cities are for the two, which are also active, right? I have been hearing constantly. They are participating to some of the World Bank TDLC workshops, some of the technical assistance we offer, but also JICA's capacity building and training, right? So they know already, they have one hand things that they can offer as the city, lessons learned from the city. On the other side, they also know the challenges of these client countries, especially in the city government level. So what they're trying to do right now is they are actually building this capacity in lessons learned on the application aspect, not only just sharing their knowledge as it is, application. Let me give an example. So this is not a water sector, but Fukuoka, for instance, they have this particular method on landfill. So, many countries in Africa, South Asia, or other regions are facing landfill, challenge because the waste management is such an issue. Now, back in 1960s and 70s, they actually, practiced this semi-aerial landfilling. And so now they are trying to apply this knowledge. One thing interesting is that when try to apply this knowledge to country in Africa, for instance, they also need to accommodate some waste picker informal settlement within the context. So how to contextualize, what they have already as a technique combined with the capacity and also the social environment are the key, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Haruka. And since we have Nishimaki-san back on video, let me pose the same question to you that I did to our other commentators. Is that given the experience that you have, how do cities in Japan that are in the business of transferring knowledge and in the business of building capacity of other countries, how do they adapt to providing that knowledge in a contextualized way to the countries and to the cities that are at a very different point in the development trajectory as compared to Japanese cities? So are there any insights that you have from that? And this is particularly important to us at the World Bank because we are in the business of taking some of these fantastic sort of gold standard experiences and to be able to repackage them and reorient them to apply them to our client countries, specifically IDA countries that tend to be low-income countries, but also fragile countries. So any advice or any insights from you would be very helpful.
Okay. This is very difficult question, actually, because when you try to apply some of the high quality standards in developing countries, this poses economic financial challenge as well in some cases. And also the challenge is the life cycle cost minimization only reveals itself after so many years, after decades. So one of the trick is that when we introduce these case studies, we hope that this becomes like the good practice example, like a Fukuoka case, and many people from other countries will visit and see themselves what was the cost implications, what it was introduced. I think seeing the best example, practice, and also adoption of this one of the most advanced technologies in Fukuoka was not adopted in other cities in Japan either. So adopting these technologies sometimes is become difficult. But looking back after so many years, it might be much easier to adopt.
Thank you so much. So there are a couple of questions that ask for how does user/cost recovery fit in as part of the two case studies? Any good practices or considerations to be drawn? So the question is really about cost recovery. And let me turn on that to you, Clive, since you have this global picture on how do we talk to our clients about recovering the costs of the infrastructure from users and from others.
Sure. Well, it's always a politically charged subject. At least it is for most infrastructure services and the ones we're talking about today. These are monopolies. They're regarded as public services, and there's often a balancing act. In most of the countries that the bank is working in, we're actually trying to expand access. If you look at, who's connected to utilities, water and electricity utilities in many of our countries, it's actually not the poorest people. And what we're trying to do is to expand access. So there's a certain element of saying, well, we need a way in which those people can perhaps have some element of service below cost. But overall, the service providers that are involved need to fully recover their costs. So they're either going to do that by a little bit extra for the other consumers, and that happens, and there are some pros and cons of that model, but that's one that's very much used. And it could also happen through transfers from the government. Now, that's often proved more problematic. Governments have often not been as consistent as they should be in paying utilities, say, for mandated services. But I think things are improving if you have stronger regulatory institutions, etc. But it's no doubt this is absolutely fundamental. If the infrastructure service providers can't get the resources in to pay for operations and maintenance, to pay for rehabilitation, give the correct signals to users about the cost of the services, then all of these principles we're talking about will be very much undermined. And so it's always a difficult discussion, but it's an essential one, and it's good it was flagged.
Indeed, and increasingly studies that we're seeing of willingness to pay are showing that when users find a predictability in the quality of the supply of service, the chances are that they are more likely to be able to pay. On the other hand, the service providers themselves may have constraints on the supply side. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg in a sense, but also at the crux of it is exactly the point that you made, is both the builder as well as the operator able to recover the initial startup costs, but also the startup cost to start with, but then the operating costs at a later stage. So extremely important points. With that, I think we are right at the end of 1 minute to the end of this wonderful webinar. This is a very important webinar for many different reasons, including the fact that QII, of course, is central to the work that we do with Japan. The G20 principles, the application of the G20 principles is very important in our partnership with Japan, whether it is through QII or TDLC, or I would also add, or through GFDRR as well, the DRM hub that is also part of our global practice. So this is an extremely important seminar. But I also wanted to flag the fact that this is the first time that we're using Hopin, this software, this platform that you are all connected to. And so you did find a little bit of glitches, certainly on my part, to be able to be in and out of it. But I want to thank our team for having done a fantastic job of pulling this off with a new platform. With that, I would like to close this. Thank all our speakers very much. Thank the Ministry of Finance, JICA, and our own colleagues who have been here, my co-chair Fatouma, as well as Hiroshi-san for being here and for making this a very strong and a very substantive discussion. As you can see, at the end of it, we still have 76 persons connected, which means that people really consider this to be a very important topic. So with that, let me hand it over to my colleague Shin, who's going to tell you about the next webinar that we have in our series. Over to you, Shin, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Maitreyi. Thank you, everyone, for joining this event. We will hold another event on compact city development and QII. I think you see the information on your screen right now. There will be another event on March 26th from 1:30 p.m. to 3:20 p.m. Japan time. For this event, TDLC will invite Mayor Mori from the city of Toyama and other key policy administrators from Toyama City to unpack the city's difficult journey toward the development of a compact city. Please check the TDLC website for more information and to register. We look forward to see you again at that event. We will make the recording available shortly and will announce through the TDLC website. Thank you again for joining this webinar today. Hope you have a great day.